Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Work at Home Rockstar podcast. Excited for today's episode. We've got another podcaster with us. He's the host of the You Can Too podcast. And what he does is he helps entrepreneurs to get out of their own way by getting to the root of their self-sabotage. So I'm very excited to be rocking out today with James Brackin. Hey, James, you ready to rock?
I am so ready to rock, Tim. Thank you for having me.
Love it. So we always start off here on a good note. Tell me a story of success in your business that we can be inspired by.
Wow. Well, the one that comes to mind first and foremost is, like you said, a lot of the podcasts I go on, I'm the youngest person that they've ever had on their show. And it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I started coaching at 17 years old, um, personal coaching, and didn't really make much sense to me. Didn't know what a coach was, didn't know how I was going to make it happen. But a coach that I hired, what I invested into myself, made me realize that I didn't have to have all the answers. What I had to have is the questions. And so
Mm,
at 18 years old, I started working with a 43-year-old woman that was in business, already had a massive ATM business, but she was working on uh, writing a book. And in that process, she just found, and I find this in a lot of people, is they get in their own way because of stuff that they may not even be aware of, right? From their childhood, from insecurities, from fears, everything in between. And so we went from having this idea of a book for 8, 9 years to being nominated for a Pulitzer Prize just by just getting her to take the action, as simple as it may be and as easy as it seems. A lot of the time, it's just helping people do the thing they know they need to do.
Yeah, I'm super fascinated by this because I mean, you are definitely the youngest, guest I've had on the podcast, and you know, now you're telling me that you're a coach, and y- like this is just it's blowing my mind because for most people they will say, the excuses are through the roof for just about everything you do. Too young, too old. Well, you must have gotten somebody who has said you're too young to be a coach. Like, how did this like? How does this even work? Like, how do you even have these conversations, right?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think the thing for me that really helped me realize was that my age was not a limitation, but it was more of a superpower. Because it's funny, like I turned 21 in about 6 days or 5 days, and I feel like the older I get, the younger I want to be. But when I was 17, I just wanted to be older so people took me seriously. But it's funny how it changes as you age, the younger you want to be. And I think for me, when I joined a coaching program of over 1,000 coaches, it didn't matter if they were in their 60s, if they were in their 20s, if they were in their 40s, didn't matter where they were at, they all had imposter syndrome just like I had imposter syndrome. And so age had nothing to do with it, but all of the fears and limiting beliefs that we had everything to do with it. And so when I realized that just because I was young had nothing to do with my wisdom or my experience, it was kind of like this, awakening where I realized it wasn't a limitation, but it was more so, if anything, it was a superpower because it gave me a fresh perspective that a lot of people, as they get into their careers, the more, um, condensed and, closed off they get to of the possibilities of things, and so my perspective usually helps people more than anything.
I totally agree. Yeah, I mean, the younger you are, the less of these experiences that you would have that hold you back, right?
Yeah,
And for you, it's just like fresh and new. Like, let's go, let's get to work, right?
yeah,
So I do see that, and especially in this technological world moving forward too. Like, I think that the older you are, the less experience or the less quick you are to grasp these new concepts
mhm.
and where things are working so quickly, things are changing so quickly with technology. I think it probably would be a superpower to have somebody in your corner that's actually kind of like up on the times. They know what's going on and they're not necessarily as stuck in their ways, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me too. I mean, I'm so like a lot of the people I have on my podcast are older, in their 70s, 80s. I've had a lot of people on the podcast that are just so much more wisdom. And for me, it was I I didn't want to go to school because I knew that that wasn't the path that made any sense to me. But I still did want to learn about neuroscience and psychology and philosophy and all these different things. And so instead of just not learning it, I decided I'm going to go learn it from people one on one rather than going to college for it. And so I feel I have a lot of wisdom for the age that I'm at. That's for sure.
Yeah, you're right about that. Sorry, my camera just got on
No
again.
worries. No worries.
You knew this was going to happen. No, so along with the good note, though, and I mean, I'm interested to hear this because there's also some bad notes that get hit. There's also things that don't go as planned, and I'm very curious. Like, what would be something like a big mistake that you've made already that you can share with us? Has there been any?
Big mistake. I mean, I really see. Mistakes are similar to failures, and I think for me, there was a moment, when I got into coaching when I realized that failure is really feedback at the end of the day. It is just an opportunity for you to learn, where you could have done better, and there was never really a moment where I felt I really messed up. It was more so this can be a moment of learning and moving forward with a little bit more knowledge than I previously had. So, not an egotistical way, but I really can't think of anything specific that comes to mind that I can think that I really failed. No.
Hang in there.
And I know I will, of course, of
And
course.
yeah, well, but on the other hand, I mean, I will sort of recognize that possibly that might be your mindset. Right? I mean, right off the bat, you've got a more positive mindset of going like, okay, well, it's not really a failure. It's more of a learning experience where I think that that's not necessarily super common in most
Yeah,
people.
yeah. I mean, I think for me, it's not that it hasn't been hard. It's definitely hasn't been the easiest. Like, it's not always going up by any means, but there's nothing that I feel I would have taken back. Like, I've invested thousands of dollars that I've wasted because I invested into coaches and people that didn't work out the way that I thought it would. But is that a mistake? I mean, it's just life happens. That's just how I see it. I mean, I don't really see there's what happens, then there's a story you tell yourself about what happens, and I always want that story to be positive, even if it isn't.
Totally. Yeah. Well, and I think that one of the things that I've noticed from that bad note when I ask people that question is that almost everybody has the bad note tied up in the good note. It's like something happens, it didn't go as planned, and then all of a sudden something really good happens out of it.
Yep.
Which, I just always find that fascinating that, people will hold themselves back and not get started because they're worried about this failure. And then it turns out that when people do go through that failure, it ends up leading to the best thing that's happened to them. Right. So you're holding yourself back to experience something that might be uncomfortable at the time that's going to lead you to the life that you want, right?
Yeah, the mental space that we hold, that we take on from of all of these things that we could have done rather than just doing the thing, learning from the thing, and then moving on. I think we forget that we are able to change our mind and we have to say yes to things and go all in on things. But like if something doesn't work a week later and you want to change your mind, change your mind. We're so solidified in black or white kind of thinking that just doesn't serve us.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good point because changing the mind, it's big because people feel like they need to be like consistent, I think, or they
Hmm.
need to not flip flop. It's like,
Yeah,
oh, well, yesterday you said this and now you're saying this. Change my mind. What's wrong with that? Why can't I do that? Right. It's it uh especially with things changing. Like if the world changes, if the way that things are happening changes, why can't I change my mind? Right. Especially since now I have new information.
you should. I mean, consistency is there's consistency bias, there's confirmation bias, and they are hand in hand because I think we are always trying to reconfirm what we believe to be true. And if our
Mm,
beliefs stay the same throughout our lives, we're not evolving. We're not becoming a better version of ourselves. We're not expanding. We're not really seeing what life can really be. And I think you should change your mind. Absolutely.
totally. And to take that even further, even if the information is still the same, you still should be able to change your mind. Yes,
Yes.
of course, if the information changes, definitely you should be able to reevaluate and change your mind. But even if it's the same, it just you might wake up and see things differently, and there's nothing wrong with that either, right?
Not at all. Not at all.
Love it. So let's talk a little bit about practice. So I talk about practice makes perfect, or does it make progress? I don't know, one or the other. But what is your philosophy on getting good and staying good at what you do?
Yeah, that's a great question. It makes me think of Seth Godin's book, The Practice. Funny enough, I had Seth Godin on my podcast about a year ago now, and it was really this thing where he instilled into me. I think we're always instilled into it that at the end of the day, it's doing the thing that we don't feel like doing. Something that has been really massive for me is thinking about how I want to feel after the thing rather than thinking about how I feel before the thing. Because most of the time, most of the things that we don't feel like doing are the exact things that we know we should be doing that will move our career forward, our business forward, our relationships forward, our life forward in any way. And so for me, it's just always thinking, how do I want to feel at the end of the day? And what does success look like for me today? And then whatever that one thing is, or those few things that I can do is, If I get those done, the day's a success. Doesn't matter if there's 1,000 more things I could have done. Let's just get to the end of the day knowing that this one thing was the one thing that I needed to do today.
Nice. Yeah, what you just said though about the thing that you are not doing or procrastinating on doing. I was reading a book, actually, I'm in the middle of this book called Who Not How. Is that what it's
Yeah,
called? Who Not How?
yeah,
Is that
I
what it's
have,
called?
Benjamin Hardy, I've had him on the show too, great guy. Yeah, great book too.
Oh, yeah, and he was talking about how if you're procrastinating on doing something, it means that you shouldn't be doing it. It means that
Mhm.
somebody else should be doing it for you, right? And I just find that that's fascinating as well. You're right. The thing that you should be doing, or the thing that you're procrastinating on, is the most important thing that needs to get done. Totally agree with that. Doesn't necessarily mean you need to do it though. It just means you need to get it done somehow, right?
Mhm. Yeah, he wrote a book called, 10X is Easier Than 2X as well.
Okay.
Great book, I'd recommend it to everyone, and it's just this ideology of, like, the, 80/20 rule that everyone knows about, like, 20% of what you do is gonna have 80% of the impact. Well, that's the same thing in, like, what you're trying to do. So, if you think of building a business or growing a podcast or whatever it may be, that, 2% is, that if you're trying to double what you're doing, you're thinking usually about doing the same things as you would if you're just going through your normal day. Like, you're thinking about the same levers. But if you think about, "What would I have to do to 10x this?" The things that you focus on completely shift. 80% of what you're doing right now needs to be thrown away. You need to focus on a completely different 20%. And so I think that's a big, mental shift too. Great book. Great book.
I'm gonna have to check that one out too. Yeah, I'm still in the middle of Who Not How,
Great book. Yeah, they're,
but
Benjamin Hardy and, they did an amazing, amazing job with the 3 books that they did.
oh, right on. Yeah, that's so cool. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about tools and instruments, and what are the kinds of tools that you use in your business to get success?
I would say the one thing that comes to mind that I think everyone could use to benefit their lives is, an app called Notion. I've used Notion for I don't know how long, genuinely. I mean, I've used it for as long as I can remember, and I tell everyone that I know that doesn't have Notion, that has a business, I say, "I don't know how you run a business without Notion," because my brain, every thought that I have, every book that I read, every podcast I listen to, everything that I'm doing, everything in my business, every email, all that kinda stuff is in Notion to keep me, like, there's so many things we need to remember. There's 1,000 emails we're answering day to day. Finding some way to keep everything in one place has been the biggest thing for me. That's been Notion for me.
I've never heard of Notions.
Man, we're gonna have
Help me out
yeah,
here.
you're gonna need to get on Notion. Think of it as Apple Notes, but way more. It's really difficult to get into when you first get into Notion. It's like a really difficult thing for your brain to quantify because there's 1,000 different things that you can do. You can have pages inside of pages inside of pages. But for me, it's just helped me consolidate everything, every part of my business. So it could be coaching is one page, and then inside of coaching, it's the avatar or the person I'm trying to reach. It could be this coaching call. It could be the second coaching call. For the podcast, it could be the pitch that I send to podcast guests. It could be the follow up email that I'm going to send to guests. It could be potential guests that I want to get on the show. Like there's just 1,000 different things that go in your head of like different things you need to do, and it's just helped me consolidate things and put them in one place, but also have a bunch of different places in that one place. If that makes sense.
I'm gonna have to check that out. Kind of sounds like Evernote in a way.
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
it similar to that?
absolutely. Yeah,
Okay. Probably got some AI in it.
big time. Yeah,
Does it?
Notion is, I found out about Evernote after Notion, so Notion just has been the thing for me, but, anyone can use anything that works for them. It's worked for me thus far.
Yeah. Well, the AI tools are huge. Are huge now. Like I know that I think that there's a lot of entrepreneurs, especially probably the older generation, that are resisting,
Yeah.
that flood, I guess. But I think that's a mistake. I think that they're not going anywhere. And right now, these tools are just so incredibly powerful. I think probably maybe it's a control thing? Why do you think anybody would resist using, any of these tools?
I think it's a pride thing more than anything.
Mm,
Um, I think for a lot of people, the consistency bias, like you stated earlier, it's like we want to be consistent with what we've always done, even if it isn't the best approach to things. And I think even more so, we feel, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs have this feeling too, is if it wasn't difficult, it wasn't meaningful. It's like we feel that if I
huh,
didn't put myself through pain to endure this, and it wasn't a difficult day, like if I didn't work from this hour to this hour, even if I got everything I needed to get done, or I got more than I expected to get done, it still wasn't a success because I didn't beat myself up to do it. And so something that makes things easier is like in our brain is like, this shouldn't be it. Like that, it's supposed to be hard. It has to be hard, right? And it questions our idea of what work, how easy work can be. Like even asking yourself the question, like, what would this look like if it were easier? Can you even dare to let this be easy? Is the question, because most people can't.
We can get into music for this one too, because there's is playing a gig work, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
it is interesting when you think about that, because we have been, like you say, conditioned to think that work has to be hard, has to be uncomfortable. Probably since we were kids, your dad
Hmm.
couldn't hang out because he had to work. Like, there's probably lots of programming in there that make us think that work has to be something uncomfortable, but
Yeah.
it really doesn't. And, there's a lot of things that throw it in there. I mean, for example, the reason why probably musicians, I don't know if you know this, but gigging musicians make the same now, maybe less than they did in the '80s. So why is that? Like,
Hmm.
and I think that probably a lot of the reason why that is because at work is fun, and people are like weird about that. Like, how do I charge for something that I'm having fun doing?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
A- And isn't that messed up? Like, I mean, like when we're starting our business, I assume most people start a business because it's what they feel called to do. It's what they want to do. It's what they like doing, right? And maybe it's not easy. And in those cases, it's easy to charge for. But what if it is? What if it is something that you really love doing and it's actually really comes easy to you? How do you start a business doing that? How do you charge appropriately for it?
Yeah. That's the difficult part, right? I mean, if we have, like, we all have beliefs that are ingrained into us, like you said, but if we don't have someone to help us question those beliefs, we will forever live in a reality that is less than what it could be. When I first started coaching, when I realized how much I was, to give context, I was 17 years old. I invested about $8,000 into a coaching program at 17 years old. I didn't have the money to pay for it. I put it into a payment plan. I was like, I'm going to figure it out. Hopefully, I figure it out. And it was this realization for me was when I invested into myself, then I'm invested into the growth. And when I had to start charging people to work with me, it was like, this doesn't feel right. But I know that if people don't invest into themselves, they're not invested into actually making the change. And so, yeah, I think we need someone outside of ourselves to kind of help us question what we believe to be true. It's like you said earlier, it's like we should be changing our mind about what we think is true. If you're not evolving. That's just how life is.
Yeah, I totally agree. And another analogy with music is that it's so much easier to promote your buddy's band than it is to promote your own band.
A lot
You
less
can easily
vulnerability.
go to a venue and say, "Oh, you gotta hire these guys. These guys are fantastic." Then you
Mhm.
go to a venue and say, "You gotta hire me. I'm fantastic." Right? And, like, that's the case. Well, then wouldn't that same sort of thing work when you're hiring some sort of coach to tell you what you're good at? Right?
Yeah, it's this thing that we want to be seen, yet we don't want to be seen. We want to be appreciated, we want to be valued, we want to be praised in everything and what we're good at. But yet there's the part of us that we don't want to be seen at all because we're afraid of being vulnerable and we don't feel safe when we're put out into the world. So it's much easier to promote your buddy's band than yourself because then you're actually being vulnerable, and that's a really scary place to be, especially in a world where, especially music as well. I could imagine it's so much criticism. So yeah, absolutely.
There's always somebody better, right? And
Yeah.
and I mean, also, we're also taught to not brag too, right? Like,
Yes.
you is it confidence? Is it bragging? Is it arrogance? Like, what all these words, some of them are positive, some of them are negative, but they all really are kind of the same thing. So what's the difference? What's the difference between promoting yourself and bragging?
Mhm. I think it's the meaning that you ascribe to it at the end of the day. If you, and I think we give too much meaning to things at the end of the day. It's kind of like getting into, like we were speaking before this. A lot of people are in a cubicle and they don't need to be there. But we live in this state of I don't want to fail rather than when I, at least the frame that I see it as is when I get to the end of my life, I'm gonna wish that there's gonna be a lot more things that I wish I did than the things that I did do and I failed at. Like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna be so much more grateful. I'm gonna be thinking, "I'm glad I did," rather than, "I wish I had." And I think that's a frame we need to take more into life because we would be so much more open in allowing ourselves to just be vulnerable, put ourselves out there, and create more opportunity for ourselves.
Right on. So let's talk about learning from the best. So coaches, mentors, we've touched on that a few times. And for you, I think I think the younger you are, probably the easier it is for you to say, okay, I think I need a coach. Right.
Mhm.
But because you think, okay, well, I'm young. I need a mentor. I need someone older to help me through this. But you mentioned that you're flipping the script here. You're someone who is young, who's coaching someone who is much older than you are. How how would you say? So let's just say that you're not young. Let's just say that you're someone who's 70.
Mhm.
Do they need a coach? And why? Like, what would you say to them if they're having a struggle, if they're struggling with trying to hire somebody to help them coach, whether they're older or younger than they?
Yeah, I think "needs" a really strong word, because I don't think anyone needs anything necessarily, but I think everyone could benefit from coaching. Mentorship, they're different, but I think yeah, I think everyone could benefit from it in some way because the frame I like to see it as is if you've met someone that sees something in you that you can't see in yourself, right? I mean, whether it
Correct.
could be your mother, it could be a friend. But a lot of the time, we just live our lives through the internal narrative of who we think we are. And so if we never get that external perspective of, well, who do you see me as? Because it might be a better version of me. There's me and then there's who I think I am. And a lot of people see who you actually are, but you don't even see that. And so having someone believe in you more than you believe in yourself is one of the most empowering things that you can do because it opens up opportunity for yourself. And then the investment aspect of it for me was this awakening where maybe I wanted to start a podcast. I wanted to start coaching people. I wanted to start building an entrepreneurial business and lifestyle, but I was fearful I had all the insecurity in the world to be able to do it. But once I invested into myself, I gave myself no other option. I'm not going to spend money and not do the thing. It's like, and so at the end of the day, I think there's so much that people can benefit from, and it goes back to what we stated earlier, where you should always have an open mind. I mean, you should be always be open to changing your mind, and so it doesn't matter how old you get. There are some of the people that I know that are older. Most of the people I know that are older are so solidified in their beliefs, and they are in such a negative headspace because what they know to be true is absolute truth, and there's no way around it. There's no glossing over it. There's no other option in their life. But for me, I'm always going to be open. And I never want to be solidified in this specific belief or way of living because that just doesn't serve me. So I think everyone could benefit.
Yep, and I agree 100% with that. I don't know, like, the word "need" is a weird one, right? But, yeah, anybody can benefit from it. Oh, wow, I love it. I love your perspective on that. And another one too is I've been told, like, this was a good one, is that you look at any sports team, professional sports team, and there's a coach. Now, do you think that coach is as good a player as the players on the team or
Mhm.
not?
Yeah.
And never are they as good. So, why would you think that those players need a coach, right? And they do need a coach actually, or they could benefit from a coach, but you don't need one, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And especially in life too, right? It's like, okay, we can have a like we have a coach in sports, for example, but we can't have a coach in life, which is like the most difficult thing. And it's not to say this is the thing that so many people need to understand is it's not that this person has all the answers, but it's more so they are a mirror or they are a person that asks you questions because you have all the answers. We all
Yeah.
have our own answers. We all know what we need to do, yet we still don't do it. And then that's like the age old question is like, why do I not do the thing I know I need to do to move my life forward? And it's like, well, because you're trying to do it by yourself. And it could be so much easier when you have someone that may be a few steps ahead or just has a different perspective than you have that can give you some kind of perspective on how you can move things forward. It's like you either spend time or you spend money. And I don't know about you, but money's being printed every single day. Time is fleeting every single second. And so I'm going to take spending money on myself every day.
I love it. I love it. And yeah, you're right. We have the answers within ourselves. It's not like think that might be a misconception is that people think that a coach is like a boss who's going to
Yes.
tell you what to do. tell you how do you live your life. And that's, well, hey, maybe there are some coaches like that, but they're not very good ones. Like, I
No,
mean, if
no.
you're going to get a quality coach, they're not going to tell you what to do. They're going to ask you the right questions. But another thing that a coach will do that is uncomfortable is they're going to probably have some sort of accountability program that's going to like hold you accountable to the things that you say you're going to do. And that is definitely uncomfortable because sometimes the things that you say you're going to do don't end up being the things that you end up doing, right? Or you may not do what you say you're going to do. And that's
Mhm.
super uncomfortable going back to a coaching meeting and not doing what you said you were going to do. But on the flip side of that, I think you touched on this earlier. If you say you're going to do something to somebody and then you know that you're going to be meeting them in a week, the chances of you doing it are probably going to be a lot higher than if you didn't have that accountability meeting coming up, right?
And if you're investing into yourself too. So think about you have the meeting and you have $1,000 that is in their bank account because of this month of coaching that you're working with them. And it's like, well, goodness gracious. I mean, I better do the thing. Like, there's been so many times. One of the funniest things, one of the first clients I worked with was he was 25, I was 17, and he would come on the call. I remember like the second call we were working together, and he didn't do the thing that he said he was going to do, and he tried lying about it, and then he just caught himself in the moment of it and started laughing, and he's like, I can't lie to you because I know that I'm lying to myself at the end of the day. And it's like, you're right. There is a lot of accountability where I see coaching as clarity and accountability. It's like, I'm going to give you some clarity that you already have for yourself. You just need to get in the depths of. And then I'm going to give you the accountability to doing what you said you would do. The amount of people that I know that make six figures a month that invest in people just to hold them accountable to doing the things that they said they would do is mind boggling to me. And it's like the people that are willing to invest into themselves are the people that are able to invest into themselves because they invest into themselves. And so I think that it's just something that people need to get through to be able to actually invest into themselves for sure.
Yeah. And that's also something that I find encouraging, I guess, is that the, it doesn't matter where you are. You can be at the top of your game. You could be like a billionaire and you're still investing in yourself and
Yeah.
having to have these accountability. Like, I think some people think that these, you know, rich people or people who are where you want to be have these superpowers and, oh, they've
Yeah.
got amazing willpower and they
Yeah.
can just do all they're people just like us and they have all the same struggles. It's not they I mean, maybe at some point if you haven't met any of these people yet, like and that's probably a challenge for you is to go out there and try to meet some of the people that are where you want to be. You'll find out pretty quickly that they're people just like you are. And the things that they're doing are the things that you could be doing to get to where you want to be, right?
Yeah, that's a big reason I started the podcast was I wanted to if I could read a book and then ask the author questions about the book that I just read, I found that was one of the most fascinating things ever. And now I'm able to do that. The book that you mentioned earlier, Who Not How, Benjamin Hardy was a psychologist that I was always so curious about. I had the opportunity to speak with him. It was like this is a human. I mean, at the end of the day, every single person's just a human. But we put these people on pedestals because maybe we never had access to them or we see the life that they live and we feel uh misled in our own journey and we feel insecure, whatever it may be. But at the end of the day, I mean, we're all on our own journey and you just need to appreciate what you have,
Love it.
which is difficult
Love it.
sometimes.
Man, I could keep going for forever. But all right, it's time for your guest solo. So tell me what's exciting in your business right now.
Man, what's inside in the business right now? There's been a lot of people that have asked me how I've been able to get the guests that I've got on my show. And I mean, starting at a young age and just really having no network by any means, I've been able to connect with some really profound people. And so I built a course on how I've been able to get guests because I've had so many podcasters reach out. How am I getting in contact with these people? So I'd say that's the thing that's most exciting and most prevalent right now is just the course and helping people kind of connect with these people to realize that they are humans at the end of the day.
Wow, that's cool. So how do we find out more?
Yeah, you can go to my Instagram, James Brackin IV. My YouTube talks a lot about it as well, and every single podcast. But yeah,
James Brackin IV,
yes, sir. The fourth.
the fourth. Okay, wow. Hold on. And so your podcast again, how do we get your podcast?
Yeah, you can too. It is on Apple, Spotify, everywhere you can find it. It's under my name on YouTube, James Bracken IV. But if you look up, you can too. I assume I'll show up as well. But yeah, YouTube and Instagram are my main platforms.
Awesome. So one more question. Now, if someone wanted to hire you as a coach, who do you think would be the type of person that would get the most out of working with you?
I think anyone that resonated with this conversation, I think a lot of people are in a place where they are just unsatisfied with where they are and not excited about where they're going. And I think that's what really excites me is helping people get excited to create a future that they're actually excited about, to move towards goals that actually instead of just getting out of bed, they're jumping out of bed and they look forward to the day. So if you're in a position right now where maybe you're at a job that you don't enjoy or you do enjoy your job, but you know there's probably a little bit more for you, um, that's probably the person.
Nice. And yeah, work doesn't have to be hard. You could actually be excited to jump out of bed in the morning, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. That can be an option. Leave that open. So many people close it off as being an option, and so they never make it happen.
Awesome. Right on. Well, thank you so much for rocking out with me today, James. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you. I appreciate the time, man. Great questions.
Awesome. And to the listeners, make sure to subscribe, rate, and comment. We'll see you next time on the Work at Home Rockstar podcast.